Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the Jews was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killed. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to Oversight Live. This is Friday, the 30th of January, 2025. And we are coming to you live from Alaska. And we are going to have a conversation today about vision for what's going to happen in this next legislative session that started last week. I am going to take us backwards just briefly because I needed to do this first up and then I failed to do so. But we need to frame this conversation that we're going to have for the next few months by kind of what the priorities are as they've been established by the leaders in the legislature. Those leaders held a press conference, and in this case, the organization that's leading the legislature is the Senate. So we're going to get into a press conference that happened last week. If you haven't seen the press conference, then you're going to be able to tonight, some clips of it. And I think it'll be instructive as far as what the priority is and who is calling the shots in the legislature. And this is important. So I don't know if I need to tee this up anymore. Some of the first video here is going to explain who's in the press conference and you'll get the gist of it. So let's jump right in and use our time wisely here. I'm going to make it happen.
Upcoming session is going to be challenging in many ways, but we have a lot of experience at this table and in the Senate majority, a lot of knowledge to help us tackle these challenges. We know we're facing even tighter revenue constraints than before. We know that demands will continue to rise, as they always have. Interesting that our finance co-chairs alone bring 90 years of experience. 90 years. We're going to start the 90 under 90 group here soon. Anyway, pleased to have them here as well. We have a
I just want to share something with you real quick here. We've got some challenging fiscal situations, and we have for a number of years. And I think it really needs to be pointed out here that who we're going to hear from here in just a minute is Senator Hoffman and then Senator Stedman. And that is the operating co-chair of finance and the capital co-chair of finance. And those are the two budgets that they control. So Senator Hoffman controls the operating budget. Senator Stedman controls the capital budget. And I'm pretty sure that last session it was swapped around the opposite direction. They alternate for the two sessions. And Senator Stevens is the chair here of the meeting. He's also the president of the Senate. And amongst the three of them, Senator Stevens says 90 years between the two of the co-chairs, but then he's not counting the many years, decades that he's been in the legislature. And this isn't just the case that they've been in the legislature. These gentlemen have been in the leadership positions of the Senate for decades, like many, many legislatures. So if there's any individuals who have direct responsibility for where we are right now in the state financially, these individuals have overseen that. It's been their priorities in Senate finance. It's been their priorities of what legislation gets through. It's their priorities on how quickly we deal with things, how drawn out they are. It's their vision for what's possible that has led us to where we are now. Now, these three individuals are fine human beings. I honestly believe that they think that they are doing the right thing. But there is no way that we can set aside the fact that they've been in charge. They've been in charge of leading the legislature. Positionally, they get themselves into the leadership position. The majority of the Senate sees fit to put them in leadership positions because of their experience. So much of where we are today has been shaped and colored by these individuals. Now we've got a governor who's finally put out a fiscal plan, and we're going to hear whether the fiscal plan in their prepared statement is a priority for them. So we're going to roll here, and we're going to get to Senator Hoffman discussing what is the issue with the operating budget.
We have a well-rounded leadership team, and we're looking forward to truly hitting the ground running this year. In spite of those challenges, our focus will remain on fiscal discipline, on protecting the essential services that we provide the people of Alaska, and on making responsible decisions that Alaskans can afford now and that they can afford as we move into the future. Senator Stedman and Senator Hoffman are here to give us a snapshot of what the Senate Finance Committee is seeing in this upcoming budget and the path that we're going to take to balance the governor's proposed version. Senator Stedman or Senator Hoffman, one of you care to start?
And just the inside baseball here and why I'm highlighting the Senate. I don't even know whether the House had a press release. The House, the House is dysfunctional and has been. It had been more dysfunctional than the Senate for all the years that I have been there. So expecting the House to actually lead a conversation or lead priorities within the legislature is not going to happen. You've got some leaders there. One in particular that's been a fixture in the House for a long time is Representative Edgman, and he works closely with Senator Hoffman. So that's where the power structure is in the House. It's fractured, and so the Senate really has an outsized influence on what happens in the legislature because these individuals have a lot of experience and they know how to run the system. So let's talk to listen to Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have been briefed on the governor's proposed operating budget proposal. He has a full dividend proposed in his budget, which, given the forecast for this year, last year it was based upon FY26 on $65 a barrel. This year, that number for the fall forecast is down to $62 a barrel, which makes it more complicated. But given the fact that if we did have a full dividend, we would have over $1.5 billion deficit. I anticipate there's going to be a lot of discussion this year on what the dividend should be, but I would assume from last year's discussion, if we adopted a $1,000 dividend with the governor's proposed budget, that would give us a surplus of about $150 million. That doesn't mean that that money will be available, because there are approximately in excess of $200 million that I see as items that have not been addressed in the governor's budget. I'll just mention the top three. The first is the disparity test, and that is a decision that hasn't been made yet. But if that is ruled against the state, that would be about $71 million. The second item is the Medicaid projections. The governor doesn't fully fund that, and that would be another $47 million hit to the operating budget. And the last one is the match from the Arms Board to pay for PERS and TERS, which is about $38 million. That brings us to the question of what the legislature is going to do. We've been dealing with deficit spending for well over 2 decades. We used to have a substantial amount of money in the Constitutional Budget Reserve account, in excess of $20 billion, but that has gone by the wayside. And
who orchestrated spending down the Constitutional Budget Reserve instead of dealing with the PFD problem, the spending problem, the taxation problem, the structural deficit that we have when oil money is no longer the largest source of revenue for the state? And if this is the first time you're hearing me say this and others say this, then this is going to be a wake up for you. Oil revenue is no longer the largest source of revenue for the state of Alaska. Excluding federal dollars, permanent fund earnings are now what the legislature sees as the largest source of revenue. And what Senator Hoffman is talking about is that we've got this deficit because of a statutory requirement to pay a dividend. Right? This isn't just a dividend in the governor's budget. It's a statutory requirement to pay a dividend that the legislature has to weigh against the fact that we don't have enough money to pay for the size of government we have plus a dividend. So it is not accurate to say that this is just the governor's dividend and what he proposes in his budget. It's actually what the legislature has established as the plan for dealing with permanent fund earnings. And the legislature has just refused to deal with that plan. They just ignore it and do what they want every year. This is the quintessential problem that we have of fighting over the dividend. We the legislature, our representatives that we send, do not want to deal with this, and they just make it a year-to-year decision instead of fixing the statutory problem that exists. What's being compared here is oil revenue versus permanent fund dividend, meaning if you read between the lines, if we had more oil money, if we had more oil revenue, then we would maybe be able to afford a larger dividend. What's not being compared, the versus, right? The what's not being compared is the permanent fund dividend versus all of the other discretionary and statutorily required spending. So we have statutes like the base student allocation, BSA, for education funding. We have statutes that tell us how we're supposed to spend money. The legislature can ignore them just like they ignore the permanent fund statutes. But they don't. They choose to look at it and say, this is stuff that we want to spend money on. Okay. But what's being compared here, that what's being set up is a PFD versus oil money, not PFD versus other spending. So we're comparing a spending item to a lack of revenue, not a spending item to other spending items. If the legislature is going to prioritize what it spends its money on, you would want to see that the permanent fund dividend is sitting there. As long as we're going to ignore the statute, you would want to see the dividend compared to all the other discretionary and statutorily required spending. And that's the comparison that you would be drawing. Instead, we're setting up this boogeyman that says the dividend, well, we can't afford the dividend because oil is the price of oil is low. Well, it's equally accurate to say we can't afford a dividend because we have such a large government, we have such large spend, and we don't want to raise taxes somewhere else. We don't want to pay for our government with taxes. We want to pay for it with using permanent fund earnings, and that means a smaller dividend. So we're not comparing the dividend as an expense to other expenses in the state government. All of the other expenses in state government, and you hear Senator Hoffman listed $200 million. That's above and beyond what the governor is requesting for his own budget. Senator Hoffman, in control of the Senate's version of the operating budget, is saying, I'm going to see the governor's budget and I'm going to raise it $200 million because I think that's where we need to be. Okay. Well, he's got to have a majority of support in the Senate for that to pass as the Senate's budget, and then the House is going to have their say as to what they want to see spending on. But the point is the framework is being set on day one with this press conference to say governor's budget plus $200 million is kind of where I see it shaking out as. The way that we're going to have the conversation here is the dividend is the boogeyman. If we do this, then we'll have money to spend for the $200 million, right? So you can see how the pressure on reducing the size of the dividend is the relief valve for all of the demands for spending. In other states, if this same thinking were coming in and the governor proposes a budget in one of the other states, and the powers that be in that state, their finance committee chairs, they say, hey, you know what? I think we need to have $200 million more in spending than what the governor has presented. Well, then they're going to turn left and right and say, well, where's the money coming from? Who's going to pay? That's what every other state has the conversation. Who's going to pay? It's going to be a tax somewhere, right? Because that's how you do it. That's how states spend money. They spend tax dollars. Except for the state of Alaska, we spend permanent fund earnings. Well, that's great. That's great. Except the permanent fund dividend is the thing that gets lost, right? It's the loser in the conversation. A dwindling PFD has consequences, just like instituting a tax has consequences. Just like cutting a budget or increasing a budget has consequences. All of them have consequences. Rich people maybe don't need their PFD, right? They can do something with it. They can do the same thing that everybody else would do with it, but maybe they don't need it because their disposable income is higher. Your folks that are lower income, that annual check that comes from their ownership interest in the state resources, statutorily designed to give them a portion of that impacts them more than it does the wealthy person. So the consequence is when the Senate co-chair, Senator Hoffman, says, well, don't know what the dividend's going to be. Could be 1,000, could be less. We got $200 million additional spend items that we need to consider here. It is worth noting that the Legislative Finance Division's forecast here at the beginning of the session for how much revenue is going to be generated by permanent fund earnings, there is an additional $200 million over what was available last year. Meaning investment earnings of the permanent fund did well, and we have more money coming in the form of permanent fund earnings this year than we did last year. So interesting to me that Senator Hoffman would say we've got an additional $200 million of discretionary spend. I don't know. It hasn't been painted as being statutorily required. And even if it was, then the legislature gets to choose whether it's going to ignore it or follow it, which boggles my mind. Why create a law if you're not going to follow it? Anyway, I've monologued here long enough, and we need to hear the rest of what Senator Hoffman has to say.
And we need to continue to save what we have in the constitutional budget reserve as a buffer for rainy day times. And I've said it a couple of times, we shouldn't be spending those dollars on one-time items. We should be looking at revenues for reoccurring expenditures, and that
this gentleman was running Senate Finance, or was at least a Senate Finance member, if not the chairman, between 2013 and today. Every year between 2013 and let's say 2016, Senator Hoffman has something to say about the budget. He has got a leadership say in what the budget looks like. And from 2013 to somewhere around 16, we spent down our constitutional budget reserve from about $16 billion to a little over $1 billion, between $1 billion and $2 billion. So in 2025, for the next year's budget, Senator Hoffman is saying, "Hey, we can't spend any more out of our CBR. We've what he didn't say, and I'll just paraphrase for him. We've spent everything that we can spend out of the CBR. We now need to keep it at its somewhere close to $3 billion balance because it's there for a rainy day." The $16 billion that was there in 2013, not so rainy of a day fund at that point. It was a, let's pay for education, let's pay for roads, let's pay for everything else that we're going to pay for in our budget that oil can't pay for because we don't have the oil revenue. It wasn't a rainy day fund now, but it is now. So let's make sure that we don't spend any more out of the CBR like the governor wants to do, or what he's proposing in his budget. It's an interesting dynamic here.
And that is why I think that the Senate had a retreat and made revenue measures as our number one priority. I know that it is a difficult issue to address, but it has to be addressed because we have not been able to reduce the operating budget. The only thing that we've been successful at and criticized heavily on is reducing the dividend from a statutory level down to $1,000.
Again, I must emphasize, Senator Hoffman has had his hands in every budget for the last decade or more. There has not been a good faith effort at reducing the cost of government. Yes, we did eliminate some positions between 2013 and 2016. Yes, we did eliminate a lot of the capital budget. Yes, there were some reductions in spending, but the overall cost of government, the way we do government, reforming government, making government less costly, has not been a focus of the legislature. It was not a focus while I was in there for 6 years. So to say we haven't been successful at reducing the cost of government it's a half truth. Yes, we have not cut the budget very much, but we also haven't really tried. Very difficult when you have a lot of special interests that want to see the state budget continue at the size that it is. All right. Remember, Senator Hoffman just told us he sees an additional $200 million that needs to be spent in the budget on top of what the governor has asked. So, of course, if you come into the conversation with a $200 million ask or identify $200 million that you think the budget needs to grow by, you're not going to be successful in cutting the budget, right? Like you can't have both of those. If you were interested in cutting the budget, you would be saying, "Hey, we need to find $200 million. The governor's budget is great, but there's $200 million in addition to what we need. So we really need to look at trimming the fat. We need to look at trimming what we don't need. We need to find efficiencies. We need to help this government find itself $200 million because it matters. Somebody else is going to have to pay for the $200 million. We're either going to have to tax somebody or we're going to take more permanent fund dividend." But that's not what's being said. What's being said is the dividend is just going to have to come down.
So it's going to be a very difficult question. I don't know. The governor has said that he wants to work with the legislature and address revenue measures. They may be there. I would assume they're probably going to be substantially different, but one way or another, if we are going to continue to provide the services that the people of Alaska have been accustomed to, that is the $1 million question. Can we come up with revenue measures this session?
And there is the crux of the problem. There is a perception in the legislature that what we are doing, business as usual, the size of the budget, the scope of government services, that's what the people are demanding. And I'm here to tell you that who's demanding it are special interests that come every single legislative session to demand that spending. We don't hear from a lot of everyday people. We certainly don't hear from a lot of lower class people economically, right? Because they can't afford to get to Juneau. This is the problem that we have with the disconnect with the cost of government. People don't understand. Everyday Alaskans don't understand how much it costs government, how much they are giving up out of their statutory dividend to pay for government. And there's this perception that Alaska, the majority of Alaska, wants the government to be doing exactly what it's doing. And thus we just keep going. Remember that Governor Dunleavy was elected, a conservative Republican governor elected twice, and he's running on fiscal responsibility, less spending. So don't tell me that the state of Alaska wants to see a continually growing budget. Senator Hoffman has his way. We're going to grow it $200 million. This is it's frustrating. We're going to pause here, and I'm going to jump over and see if there's some chats here. Let's see. Michael Dukes has joined the show. Good evening, Michael. It's good to see you. He says this a lot on his radio show in the mornings from 6 to 9. Parkinson's principle for government spending. It's exactly right. You get more money, you know, the taxes go up, the investment earnings rise, and then you get more government because it just rises to fill the need, right? Or the amount of money that's available. And Tawny, you've said you tried commenting on yesterday's video and the comment wouldn't post. I just want to let me know. Okay, thank you. I will check that out. I'm not exactly sure which looks like YouTube. Looks like you are on YouTube. I'll check with YouTube and see what's going on there. Anyway, that catches up with the chats tonight. Let's take a listen to what Stedman has to say on the operating budget. I'm sorry, the capital budget.
We're going to go to Senator Stedman to raise our spirits.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, following up on the operating budget, Chairman, after he spends all the money, then comes the capital budget. And the capital budget, I don't see having a whole lot of flexibility in it. The concern there is that we have not had as much funding in maintenance as that I think we should have. Clearly, last year there was only 3 schools in the major maintenance list that got funded. I think we had a list of 10 when we sent the budget to the governor. This year there's no money in the budget for major maintenance at K-12. And I think I just heard a few minutes ago, some school up north fell down. Aniak. Whole school fell down around their ears. There's no money in it for courts for major maintenance. There's no money in it for the third one, I'll think of it here in a minute, the university. So if we don't do major maintenance, you're going to end up with just a bunch of junk, and it's not going to work. So
we have been reducing, and like I said earlier, we had large capital budgets back in the back before the oil prices dropped back in 2013, and we cut our capital budget significantly, like drastically. And my entire time in the legislature, we did not have super large capital budgets. There's one thing that the economy, the private sector economy relies on. It is capital spending in the form of economic commerce requires roads. Families require schools, right? Capital spending is another one of those expenses that should be competing on the same line of thinking here with permanent fund dividend, if you're gonna keep the dividend in the budget and not follow the statute, as well as operating spending. Okay, so what we're going to argue here is that the dividend needs to go down because we have capital spending. In other words, we don't want to compete. We don't want to have the operating budget compete with the capital budget, because those are just government spends. Both of those things have to be the way they are. What we have to do is take more of the permanent fund earnings and apply it to the capital budget or to the operating budget. Senator Hoffman wants to have $200 million added to the operating budget, and Senator Stebbins scratching his ears trying to find millions of dollars for the capital budget. So your very, very large operating budget, when you grow employees and you grow services and you grow benefits, your capital budget suffers, or your dividend suffers, because that's where the alternative would be. So your big suck in state government is your operating budget. People, wages, insurance, healthcare, all of that. Talking to business owners in the private sector, you're not surprised. That's where the cost of doing business is. That's largely where your costs are your people, right? Well, every raise that gets worked into union contracts is a direct competition to either the dividend or capital spending. Now we're going to have a conversation about raising taxes. The governor's put out a fiscal plan, a list of components on a plan that says all of these things need to be taken and enacted together. And what I fear is going to happen is there's going to be enough people in the legislature that say, we don't want to cut any more dividend, and we don't want to cut any capital budget and operating budget. We need to add to those budgets. And so we'll go ahead and go tax people, and we'll just grow spending. Not grow the dividend, because we're going to say we're not going to tax people in order to pay a larger dividend. We'll just tax people to pay $200 million more in our operating budget or a larger capital budget. That's what we're going to do. That's what I fear is going to happen. That's the difficult conversation, difficult question that they're going to have down in the legislature. When do we say, what size should our operating budget be? All of the services that we have in the state of Alaska, that the essential services, right? Roads, police, education, dare I say healthcare. Every other state in the nation has to do similar essential services. We're at the top of the list for cost per capita for how we're delivering government. Yes, it's more costly in the state of Alaska because of our distance from each other and from the continental United States. Yes, there are significantly more expensive things that are significantly more expensive in the state of Alaska than they are in other states. The cost of living is higher. But even when you factor in a cost of living adjustment and an allowance from like a national average cost of state and local spending, the state of Alaska is still significantly more than what a reasonable cost of living would be. So the government continues to grow. The operating budget continues to grow. Private people continue to suffer, either because our infrastructure crumbles around us or because the dividend, gets squeezed.
So we've got to maintain our infrastructure, and also that doesn't address DOT major maintenance, the haul road, for instance, with the trucks getting their undercarriage ripped up, brand new trucks. I think that we need more funds in the maintenance, and those shortfalls that Senator Hoffman had mentioned that he's dealing with in the operating budget does not include these. So I've been telling my district that this current year's budget will be very similar to the current budget in place. The price of oil is down a little bit. Headcount in schools are down 2% across the state. So that, reduces that a little bit. But we're going to have another tight year. And I would agree with Senator Hoffman at some point, the dam's going to break. We also have not talked about some of the agencies that are having extreme difficulties in meeting their fundamental goals and objectives. So if you look forward to a financial plan going forward for the state, you've got to not go broke in year 3 if you're looking at a 5-year plan, or if you're looking at a 10-year plan, you can't go broke in year 5. And you certainly have to have a good base to start with. So we're going to have to add back a lot of these components into the current year's budget just as a starting number. And those in the state that think we should not maintain schools probably don't have any children in school or grandkids in schools. That's one of our fundamental obligations. So I look forward to working with Senator Hoffman. Hopefully he has a little bit extra change for the capital budget, but payroll comes first. Payroll comes first when push comes to shove. And we're going to make payroll one way or the other.
So there you have it. Payroll comes first. And this just reinforces my argument. So I served in the legislature for 6 years. And I did this in 2024, budget discussions during fiscal year 25, so 2024 legislative session. I said, what are we spending? How many people have we hired while I've been here, and what are we spending on positions that haven't been filled? I want to know where we're wasting money. Well, in order to do government, essential services, in order to do government from 2019 to 2024, we had to add 600 state positions. And our pay and benefits line, personnel services line, went up $600 million. You can go check the state OMB's website and pull the budgets yourself and verify the numbers, okay? So we've added 600 people to do the same thing we were doing in 2019 as we're doing in 2024. We've added 600 positions. Okay, so now I said, well, how many of those positions actually have heartbeats in them? Okay, what I identified was hundreds of positions that were vacant. We hadn't hired. And I asked legislative research, I said, hey, can you tell me how many jobs are being announced right now? How many are announced on the website, on the state website, for positions that are open? Like we're actively recruiting for people in the state. And they came back with a number. Wouldn't you know it, that the number of open positions that are being recruited for did not match and was less than the number of open positions that are statutorily authorized and funded. Now, I will caveat here and say that state budgets have a vacancy factor built into the budget, which means we're not giving you 100% of the money for each one of your positions because you have a vacancy. or there are some vacancies. People come and go. There's normal churn in a government jobs, just like there is in every other job. People quit and move out of state, and then new people come in and get hired, that type of thing. We had $300 million in money that was being appropriated in that budget. This was in 2024 for the fiscal year 25 budget. $300 million that was being appropriated in positions that people were not in. Some of those were legitimate because they were actively recruiting and there were people going to be hired in them, and it's just a matter of timing for when the report was pulled. Many of them were not being hired into. Matter of fact, there was a fish and game. I remember this. There was a fish and game position that hadn't been hired. The last time that somebody had actually occupied that position was a decade ago. But we continued to fund that position, meaning money in the budget is earmarked for that position every year and comes out of taxes or comes out of the dividend and gets directed to that department. And now they've got this money to pay somebody that they are never going to hire. And we go back and say, the largest expense, the highest priority is our pay and benefits. It is paying the salaries of our state employees. Well, we are wasting, we have very little visibility on where that money goes. So it's easy for me to say we're wasting it. But we are appropriating money that is getting spent every year, but it's not getting spent for the reasons that the legislature appropriated it for, which was for people in positions. So if you want to look at reducing the cost of government, there's some fraction of maybe $300 million that you could go and find just based on better management. Do not allow this giant slush fund to exist and require managers to be more efficient with their money. Is this a legislative requirement? Is this something that a legislature should do? Or should OMB and the governor and the executive branch be doing this? And the answer is yes, both. Both have a role in this. But if you're going to tell me with 90 years of experience sitting at the finance tables that we have to have tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars appropriated to positions that nobody's ever going to get hired in order to grease the skids of our state government, if you're telling me that that's necessary and we can't do without it, then I'm gonna raise a flag on this, right? Because that is BS. It is not good governance. It is not fiscally responsible behavior. Senator Hoffman wants to add $200 million. I would say go find your $200 million in your vacancies and stop taking it out of the people's pocket, either in a new revenue measure, a new tax that you're going to put in place, or taking it out of the dividend. This is just proof positive that government spending is taxation in one form or another. If you take it out of somebody's dividend that they would have otherwise been able to spend, or whether you take it out of their tax from their paycheck or their sales tax, either way, any of those three ways or any other way you can come up with taking money from people, you have to, because the state government doesn't produce anything. It doesn't produce money, right? It has to take it from others. All right, so we've covered the two budgets in this press conference that's shaping the people's perspective on what the priorities are for the Senate. What do you think another priority is here that they're gonna telegraph to the people? Well, it's education. So what are we gonna learn on education here? I'm gonna turn this
I've asked Senator Tobin to provide a brief overview of the progress of this important task force, bipartisan and bicameral, and Senator Tobin is the co-chair of that task force. And what do you anticipate going forward, Senator Tobin?
Thank you, President Stevens. Well, as folks know, the Education Task Force was authorized under House Bill 57. We did kick off with our inaugural meeting this past year, and we are looking forward to submitting our recommendations to the full legislature on the first day of the 35th legislature in 2027.
Okay, so if you're talking and expecting any sort of education reform to come from the Senate or be approved in the Senate, I hate to burst your bubble, but these folks are telegraphing that they're going to wait until the first day of the next legislative session, so that's January of 2027, before they see the report from this working group, before they agree to any sort of education. This is why the governor said a few months ago, he's like, I'm not going to make education a priority this session. They're not going to do, the legislature is not going to do, the Senate is not going to do anything about education reform. Not this session. They're already telegraphing that education task force is going to provide some recommendations. So why would we do anything before the recommendations are out? So those of you that were hoping that education was going to be taken care of, that we were going to be able to address something, this is telegraphing right here that it is not going to happen until next legislature.
One of the things that we've really appreciated is the opportunity to visit many different school sites. We have gone to Wasilla, to Anchorage, to Kenai, to Fairbanks, and Anana, and we are continuing our school site visits this year by focusing here on Southeast while we are here in session, and then, of course, organizing what we hopefully will be a large contingency of lawmakers out to the Bethel area so that we can see schools in our rural communities. We anticipate continuing our task force meetings during the legislative session. We will actually be taking up the Senate Education Committee time so that we are able to maximize lawmakers' schedules.
So if you wrote an education bill and it got sent to Education and Education Committee in the Senate, they're going to be doing task force business, not committee business. They're not going to take up any education bills.
I will be leading many of those along with my co-chair, Representative Himshoot. We are looking forward to our next task force meeting, which will be this Friday, where we'll be talking about attendance policy. We have heard many folks question our enrollment practices, including changing to an open enrollment system, trying to address chronic absenteeism, and of course, navigating the students who are experiencing houselessness and homelessness and housing insecurity. As we know, federal resources are very volatile at this current moment as the current budget defunds the entire McKinney-Vento program. Future topics and conversations include really focusing in on healthcare and insurance and continued conversations about charter schools and charter school funding, as well as tribal compacting and localizing education. I am very much looking forward to hearing from community members.
I've asked.
So again, just so you're aware, what the Senate is telegraphing is that education bills are dead on arrival. We're going to wait until next year, next legislature, before we address any sort of education issues. Senator Stedman is famous there for saying that the legislature can only do one or two big things a year. So education, you did it last year. Senate Bill 57 or House Bill 57, whichever it was, that gave the BSA increase. That was your one thing. You're not getting anything education related out of the legislature this year. Okay, we're running out of time. Let's go over here to the chats and see what's going on here. Michael Dukes followed up. He said $8 billion in deferred maintenance because they chose to spend the money on other more sexy things. Yeah. Bringing home the bacon or meeting your special interests needs, right? So we'll continue to pay the dividend tax. Corey says, so we'll continue to pay the dividend tax and now a sales tax. How about they match the percentage of tax with the same percentage of spending? Yeah, Corey, I've been saying this for a number of years. We're going to have to make a decision. Do you want a tax and a dividend, or do you want a tax and no dividend? It is just a matter of time. That is the direction that we're headed. It is structurally what is going to happen. Unless there is an uprising and says, you know what? We can do with less services. We want a less expensive government. This is ridiculous that we are, I don't know, what is it, $18,000 per person, state and local spending. We're the highest per capita spending for state and local government in the nation. And it has to be this way. 90 years of experience on Senate finance, and it has to be this way. Tawny, I'm glad you're participating tonight. How about reducing the pay raise they voted for themselves several years ago? That'll get us a couple hundred million, or a couple hundred. That'll get us a couple $1 million, right? Get us closer. It's just a thought flittered away, and I don't have a whole lot of time to run with it, but we're already suffering from not having the highest caliber of people making decisions in the legislature. And we're paying them $80,000 a year. Just saying, you get what you pay for sometimes. Yeah, Tawny, this is exactly what I tried to do. Eliminate those vacant positions, more than 3 years empty. I got this will really frustrate. The current minority leader in the House, Representative Delana Johnson, she was finance chair. She's not having it. No way are we going to eliminate those positions. I couldn't even get the Republicans within my own caucus to support championing. Well, that's why we're in the majority, championing reducing vacancies, funding for vacancies. It's ridiculous. Corey says, how do we, the public, change this? Is there anything we can do? Yeah, I think there is. It happens at the ballot box. You can call into radio programs. You can write letters to the editor of your news. You can not give up. You can not be silent. You can have a conversation with people in your neighborhood and in your circle and say, hey, look, we are spending way too much in the state government. It is time we do something about it, and communicate that to your legislators. I don't know. Maybe spend $1,000 and go to Juneau one weekend, not a weekend, during the week, and go visit somebody. Yes, there are things to be done. None of them are super pleasant. Like, there's not an immediate reward for it. But yes, there are things that can be done. It all matters on who you elect. We got a governor's race, right? Which candidate is going to focus on government reform? That's the candidate I want to support. Governor Dunleavy showed us exactly what's going to happen if the next governor comes in and says, hey, we're going to play whack-a-mole and we're going to smash the budget down by $1 billion. And that's how we're going to solve our problem. You saw exactly what happened in his first term, and that's what would happen again. Politically, that is a very hard thing to do in this state, is just whack the budget. So what can you do? You can encourage and elect, you can elect the governor who's going to take the 4 years that they're given, and they're going to reform state government. They're going to reform it. They're not going to promise you a bunch of things that they're going to spend money on. They're going to reform state government. They're going to take what the services and the essential services that we need, and we're going to figure out a way, just like other private corporations do. The private industry does this all the time when things get out of whack. We figure out how to do what our customers need, and we do it at a less cost. Where there's a will, there's a way. You make it a priority. You spend money and you put your calendar, put things on the calendar, right? You prioritize effort towards reforming state government. If that's your priority, then where there's a will, there's a way. Let that battle happen for the next 4 years. Michael, Andy Josephson, those departments might need those. Yeah, yeah. All of the Democrats and some of the Republicans are always going to point to the administration and say, we can't cut that. Those people need that. I had this interesting conversation with a special interest group, a nonprofit that came in. They were providing daycare and needed state funding. And I said, how many students, how many kids do you have in your daycare? I kid you not, they did not have an answer for me. They came to Juneau to brief us on why they needed the money, and they did not know how many kids were there. Now, could have been that they picked the wrong guy, wrong gal to come brief. She just didn't have the facts. I get it. Possible. You would think that if you come before the legislature, you would know exactly how you're spending the money. But I guarantee you, after the conversations that I've had, we don't know where all of our money is going. The legislature is not requiring, during the budget process, we don't require the people who we gave money to last year to come back to us and tell us how they spent the money. We're not measuring it in any useful manner. There is so much room for better management in state government. So much room. And if you want to hire the governor to go, the next governor, that's what they need to be focused on. Not solutions in whacking budgets and creating taxes. Reform. It has to be the executive branch. Oh, you're saying that the Education Task Force, the official title is Education Funding Task. Yeah, I misspoke, didn't I? Well, you can bet that next year there'll be a funding conversation with that Education Task Force. There might be some reform items, but you can hear the districts. They're already saying that what happened last year, even though it was the largest increase in BSA, that it isn't enough. We need more. Corey wraps this out right now. It looks like probably the last comments that we're going to get to today. Yes, the governor we elected started there, but folded quickly. That is what history shows. And, honestly, it's a hard thing to do. It is hard to come into the system there in Juneau and fight that battle all the time. But that's why you hire somebody who's got intestinal fortitude to go do it. All right, one last clip here in the time we got. This is Senator Wielechowski on election reform.
So I'll now turn to Senator Wielechowski, who has been working on the election reform package. Because of the timing last year, we weren't able to get it across the finish line. But moving forward on this issue is definitely a priority of this caucus. Senator Wielechowski, can you give us an update on what's happening, where the bill stands, changes that are maybe taking place, and a timeline for getting this done this session?
Thank you, Mr. President. Alaska continues to be by far the most challenging state in the nation to conduct elections, some of which are things that are out of our control, like weather. You have communities where you can't get ballots in or out sometimes for days. But some of which are within our control, like the inability to get poll workers. And so this bill has been a work in progress for a number of years.
Poll workers. You know what? If there were people in your community who would just volunteer to go work the polls, we wouldn't have a problem. You ask, what can we do? You could get engaged. Like, volunteer to go do the things that government, what he's probably going to get to say is here, hey, we're going to have to start paying poll workers. We have to pay people to show up to work the polls. Because we have a shortage of poll workers. It's amazing to me that cities the size of the population of Alaska in other states, cities with populations greater than the state of Alaska, can figure out how to do elections better than we can. We're the population of a city in most states, and we're the hardest. We can't figure out how to run elections. There's something wrong here. Like this math does not add up.
Hopefully we've refined it to the point now where we're ready to pass it and get it to the governor for his signature. Some of The critical things, though, that we're looking at addressing are the fact that there are 106% more registered voters in Alaska than there are adults in Alaska. That is something that is very concerning to people. The fact that 15% of the ballots in many rural communities were thrown out because of technicalities several years ago. The fact that high percentage of military voters' ballots were thrown out because of technicalities. The fact that a number of people, dozens, perhaps hundreds of people living in assisted living homes, ballots were thrown out, not because of an error that they made, but because of errors by poll workers. Concerns over the length of time to get ballots counted. These are the things that we have addressed in the version that is now in front of the House Finance Committee. This bill has passed the Senate and it is in the House. The hope is that this will be a priority. I know it is a priority for the Senate. In talking with House members, I know it's a priority for them as well. And the hope is that we can get it passed early on so that we can get these changes, these critically needed changes, these bipartisan, nonpartisan changes in place for this year's election. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to make that a priority on Oversight Live to dive into that bill in particular and take a look at it, because it's important that we solve some of these issues with the. Notice he didn't say anything about ranked choice voting because he's on the other side of the aisle with that. I think he's in favor of ranked choice voting. So that will not be likely in the bill that they're considering. Anyway, well, we're over an hour here, and I respect your time. I said I'm only going to keep this to an hour, so we're going to end. Thank you all for participating. One last check. Yes, the governor elected. Okay, let's see. Tawny, I worked the polls. They're already paid. Yeah, they get a small stipend. I get it. What are we going to do to get more, I guess, right? You're either going to volunteer and go get your small stipend, or you're going to have to hire professionals to come run your election. I don't know. What do you do? We've got an electorate that doesn't want to participate in large enough numbers. We got to encourage people. Like, civic duty has got to become popular again. Serving others has got to become popular. Leaders in our community, people that other people respect, right? We got to start talking about it. Be like, and not just talk, but demonstrate with action. Take the first step. Go volunteer and say, hey, come on, let's do this together. We're gonna go spend this evening watching people cast ballots. I mean, how many elections do we have? Like, I'm thinking about borough elections in our service area boards where there's one person running or rerunning. We get, like, this is self-government. We get, like, it only works if we participate. So what can we do? There's a lot we can do. Stop waiting for people to tell you what to do, I guess. Go find something to do. Be productive. I don't mean to be flippant with that. There's lots out there that can be done to steer the ship in a more positive direction. And there's lots of people doing it. So find out people who are trying to make a difference and surround them. Help them with their goals. Anyway. All right, I digress. This has been a fun time. I've enjoyed listening to this press conference with you all. I know it's almost 2 weeks. Well, it is 2 weeks old now, but I think it frames kind of the priorities pretty well that I think the Senate is going to focus on for this next legislative session. So don't expect a whole lot coming out of the Senate. It's bare bones finances and a fight to the death on PFD, because that's where the money's coming from. Corey, you're welcome. I'm having fun and I'm learning here, so more to follow. All right, folks, have a good night. My family's celebrating 3 birthdays tonight, and I stepped out to come have a conversation with you all, and I'm going to go join the party in progress if there's still one. Hopefully you haven't heard any loud partying going on. Anyway, have a good night, and we'll see you Monday night.